A lot of people in our audience follow what's going on in AI through places like Tech Review, and um, uh, I have noticed there the percentage of AI-oriented stories increasing on a regular basis. I think you probably feel, as an editor, you could run several magazines off of the number of AI stories that come through. Um, but I think we're at a very interesting moment. And we're at one where there seem to be different groups framing the moment differently, often in their self interest. So I saw you did a review of a couple books on OpenAI, including one by our mutual friend and colleague Karen Howe. And in that review, which was a couple weeks ago, I encourage people to go read it. I think it was the end of May at your site. Um, it talked about the trade offs that are involved and how groups like OpenAI, people like Sam Altman, have been evangelists and they've been selling an idea and an image, and they've been playing down the disruptions, the costs, the potential impact on things like income equality or job distribution or even things like national power. Karen's book, which I think is very good, deals with this, and we'll have Karen on soon. But I was wondering, from your perspective right now, um, how do you see this debate um, evolving? How do you see the sides shaping up?
Um, there are several ongoing, I feel like, debates about AI right now. I think you're referring to one that's I think you could think of it as sort of the extraction debate, and it's about the extraction of resources such as uh, resources such as critical minerals, but also resources such as intellectual property. Things that are, Karen gets in her book a lot, things that are taken without asking, almost, in terms, and to build these language models and have them. And we're really talking about LLMs here in terms of AI in this debate. Uh, Things that are taken to make language models perform well, often without permission, often without without making sure that it's beneficial from the people for the people everywhere, not just a small cluster of those in California. I think there's also other debates. There's a something that's really exploded on the internet in the last couple of days has been the what I think of as almost a false choice, which is AI is going to do everything or AI is completely useless. There's that debate that's happening, and I think that there was a New York Times Magazine issue that just came out. Some of the pieces just came out yesterday on AI that I think really inflamed that on the internet this week. But and then there's I think there's yet another debate, which is and we can get into all of these to some extent, about has AI plateaued? Have language models plateaued? For example, there was this Apple paper that came out recently that poured some cold water, or tried to pour some cold water on on reasoning models, and their ability to actually reason or solve problems. And then there's subsequently been people taking issue with that, saying, "Oh, well, the math problems are unsolvable." But I think this extraction thing that you're talking about is one of the is the most interesting, because it's the one that affects the most people right now. We've had and tell me if you want me to stop here and go back
Keep
to you,
going.
but
Keep
we
going.
we had this series on AI and energy a month ago. We published in May, and one of the things that we got into in it is the big AI companies, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, or Meta, what have you. They all have these huge energy demands to power their language models, and they've all been, looking for sources for energy and talking about building out the grid and talking about, bringing back nuclear and like some of these ideas sound great, right? Like I think, personally, I'm someone who's a proponent of nuclear power. I think it's, I think it's an energy source that we shied away from and probably shouldn't have. But those plants aren't going to come online for 10 years. What is going to come online in the meantime are natural gas plants. And so when these AI companies are looking for more energy, the things that's going to fill that in the short term is going to be natural gas. That's going to be something that, those plants will be around for 30 years. The ratepayers in Nevada or in Virginia, where a lot of these are being built out, are going to be on the hook for these for a long time. And it's being done without a whole lot of public discussion. That's the same thing that Karen really gets into a lot in her book. She talks about things that are happening in Chile, or the ways that, these workers around the world were doing data labeling and essentially building the AI, and lands on this interesting note, I think, about ways that in some places, she has an example that I highlighted in my review, but I thought was a powerful one in New Zealand, where there's basically a community-driven language model. It's a small language model. It's not extractive. It's supported by the community, and I do think that this debate about who owns what that builds these language models, whose resources go into them, is expanding right now beyond just the intellectual property debate about extraction, which is where it's been. We've been talking for a long time now about the training data that fed these models, the 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 intellectual property of however many authors that's gone into these that's gone into training these models, the artists' works that have gone into training these models. And now I feel like that discussion is moving past just that, and it is moving into one more about the wider use of resources by them. There have been stories in a number of publications, not just ours, about these. I do think that's where some of the debate is moving.
Well, typically debates like this are supposed to be solved in advanced or modern societies by government. And, the debate about the arrival of the Industrial Revolution took about 100, 150 years to be resolved by different governments. And in the United States, of course, there were big countervailing forces. You had the industrial North, the agricultural South, two different models battling each other, led to a civil war. Um, this revolution is arguably as consequential as the Industrial Revolution. But what's interesting to me is that, although you're right, there are some groups that are emerging that are kind of Orwellian, four legs good, two legs bad, all AI is bad, and so forth. But right in Washington, from where I'm sitting right now, we have a government, and the attitude of the government, which has a lot of AI people in and around it, is kind of like, let's have at it. Let's AI do what it's going to do. Let's not regulate it. Let's not worry about the various extractive issues, whether it's the intellectual property of writers whose work is used in LM, or content creators whose work is used in LM. But also let's not worry about the environmental consequences of big data centers, and let's not worry about the potential labor market disruptions. In fact, in the current bill that exists before the Congress, there's this provision: states shall make no regulations pertaining to AI for the next 10 years. The other states have responded differently. You talk about New Zealand. The Europeans have responded differently. Chinese differently in yet another way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm wondering what do you think the consequences are of the U.S. being in the mode that it's in right now, which is kind of like, have at it, guys. We're just gonna pull away any hurdles you might face.
I mean, I've been asking people. I asked someone about this in industry yesterday, um, And it's interesting to me that I've heard from a number of people who work in um, AI that they would like some frameworks in place. The reason that we have them from the states is that we haven't seen that much from the federal government. We have, Biden's AI Act, but we don't really have very much in terms of actual legislation. And I do hear, and I don't think that it's, I don't think that these are crocodile tears, or that they're not genuine. I do hear from people, some of it is, uh, uh, working in AI, that they would like to have some sort of regulatory frameworks. It helps them know how they're going to operate. And, for the big incumbents, it gives them a market advantage because they're able to deal with it and craft that stuff. But my view on the like, are we just going to have the AI industry go crazy, just not let the states make any laws, just let it rip? I do think that a patchwork of state laws is probably not a great thing, but I also think that this is an important enough industry that we need, if you're not going to have, legislation at the state level, and I think the states should be able to do some types of legislation, um, that the federal government has got to step in the lead, and that's definitely not happening. Right now, the federal government is all about let it rip, and not just on AI, obviously. And I think the assumption, I assume that their assumption is that by completely stripping away all regulation, we'll be able to better compete with China, et cetera, but probably mostly China. And the interesting thing is that China has a number of restrictions on AI usage, and my view is that it would be better for us to have the federal government maybe taking, as it often does, taking cues from the states, and then using that to craft a policy that everyone knows what their knows what the rules are, knows what the playing field looks like, and can move forward. I'm not an AI doomer by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that it's going to take over the energy grid and kill us all, kind of stuff. But it's going to have a profound effect on employment. You're already starting to see evidence of that, and I think that there's a role for the federal government to play. Whether they should get out ahead of themselves is a separate question. But the idea of just like we're going to sit back and see what happens, just that surprises me.